Good morning, guys. Welcome to Fishful Thinker In Depth. I'm Chad LaChance, and I appreciate you joining us. Now, if you're a fan of the show, you're probably familiar with our in-depth concept. Basically what it is we look at a show that we put on the air that you guys bombed us with questions about. Maybe you had questions or concerns or just wanted more information. We can only communicate so much in a 30-minute TV show. So we do the season of In-Depth to try to answer some of the other things or describe to you the nuances that made that day be successful and ultimately landed it on TV. So today's show is from southeast Colorado. It's a place called Adobe Creek Lake, also known as Blue Lake. It's a state wildlife area for Colorado. CPW sent us down there and we had a great time. So stay tuned, get comfortable. It's going to be a fun show. Fishful Thinker is brought to you by Sportsman's Warehouse. Gear up for unforgettable. Peterson Toyota, Fort Collins, Colorado. Berkeley, your fish, our science. Abu Garcia, fish to win. Lawrence, find, navigate, dominate. Officially, the state wildlife area is known as Blue Lake, but most anglers know it as Adobe Creek Reservoir. It can be a big, massive, sprawling lake in southeast Colorado. It can also be a mud puddle or even just a dirt spot. And so that's very important because it's a boom or bust lake. When that lake floods, when it's got water in it, it grows fish like weeds, and Parks and Wildlife knows it. It's also a very popular fishery for the harvest crowd because of it. So they've stocked tons and tons and tons of fish in that lake when it's got water in it. And then all of you guys go and harvest a lot of them and they get eaten. Whenever we have a drought year, then the water goes down, you can't get a boat in there, harvest numbers go down, blah, blah, blah. I don't have to tell you what happens when the lake runs out of water. The boom and bust cycle is important that you try to catch it about 2 or maybe 3 years after it's got water that it's going to hold consistently, because you need to have some time for fish to grow. And that's basically what we did. I talked to the biologist in the area. He told me, hey man, that lake's coming on right now. There's a lot of eater-sized fish in the lake. There's no monsters, but lots of eaters. So you should go down there and check it out. So we were in the area basically, and so we made the drive. I think we went over from Trinidad the day before. Drove over to Blue Lake and we got after him. We were there earlier than most people, and we got out on the lake and had most of the lake to ourselves. And I started looking around on the graph, having never been there before, and lo and behold, there's not a lot of structure in that lake. There's not a lot to look at. It became obvious that we were gonna fish very small structural changes, and I mean very small, like a little roll in the bottom, a couple of feet of roll in the bottom, or anything that the color line on my Lawrence unit showed me was denser than anything else around it. And that's a whole conversation for Lawrence or for sonar interpretation. But any place I saw a hard bottom on the graph told me that's where I should fish. And that's basically all I did, was just beeline for any place I could find that and then fish. We figured out that this ridge will work right here pretty good, and easy there, fish. What did I catch this time? Yeah, that's what I thought those were, guys. We marked a bunch of fish on the graph, and I was just telling the camera guy that I thought that they were maybe crappies because they were stacked vertically, and that's a little tiny crappie for this pond, and there's supposedly lots of those in here, although I couldn't prove that, so we're going to try to find out. But then again, guys, there's another argument as to why we throw the gulp minnow so much, because if you throw a bait that everybody will bite, especially in a lake you don't know anything about, you put yourself in the hunt. And we've seen, as we've banged around here, we've been working about a 100-yard square, we keep seeing these little piles of fish that are stacked vertically, a little stack of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them, and they're not horizontally. If they were stacked more horizontally, I'd say they were walleyes or saw guys, in this case saw guys. But because they're stacked vertically, that tells me crappie. And I think that some of these light bites I've been getting are those crappies. So that's the first one I've hooked. And I'd be willing to bet you that if we put a grub down and swim that, as opposed to hopping this minnow, we'll catch more of those crappies. Crappies tend to like a more subtle action than does a saugeye or walleye. And so we may end up putting a grub down there and swimming it. A little bit less erratic than this minnow right there, but it's okay. We've been fishing just a few minutes and we're getting them figured out pretty quick, guys. There's a ridge right here where the water goes from basically 4 feet and they're 3 feet or less, and then rolls off into 6 or 8 feet, and they're sitting along the top of that ridge. Fish, got him. I got him right there, bud. I think we can work on this ridge for a while.
Maybe I won't get a blade bait out. I keep threatening to get a blade bait out, and every time I go to do it, I catch another saw guy. Come on up in here, buddy. And we on our show, we're terrible about describing the difference between saw guys and walleyes. And I know I'm told by the biologists that these are saw guys, and so there you go. There's another one, looks suspiciously like the others, and now we are racking them up at this point, and our little Gulp minnow is paying the bill. So far, there's 3-4 boats right here besides us, and we're the only ones catching anything, and they're trolling.
Fishful Thinker is brought to you by Peterson Toyota, Fort Collins, Colorado. Sportsman's Warehouse, gear up for unforgettable. Lowrance, find, navigate, dominate. It didn't take very long for the whole crowds to show up, and it was definitely the fill the coolers crowd, which is what that lake's associated with. And just for the record, I have no problem with that, but that's what everybody was there doing. Almost everybody showed up and were trolling, and I suspect that it's because the lack of structure in the lake. There's no obvious place to fish. There's no place that jumps out at you saying, yeah, right here, this point is where I should fish, or this big hump, or anything like that. There's nothing there. It's mud and some rock bottom in some areas, and that's it. And because of that, it was the most popular technique, let's just say. And in the morning, the funny part was the trollers weren't catching anything, and we started catching them right away. And that's because we're fishing on the spot. We're sitting on one little roll or one little break, and it only took me a couple of minutes to connect with walleyes and saw guys and crappies, because I studied the graph first as we ran around until I found the hard spot that I thought might be the right idea. Conversely, the trollers just keep trolling around until they stumble into fish, which is also a fantastic idea, but they weren't biting well in the morning, and the trollers weren't catching them. By afternoon, the trollers were catching them faster than we were catching them because we wore out our spots, and that's a key thing. The trollers don't wear a spot out because they're going all over the place. And we talked to several folks that day, a bunch of kids, ran into some fans on the lake, and people were literally trolling right by us because we didn't care. We're sitting on a spot and let them go, and they would troll by, half a cast length from our boat and have a conversation with us, and we didn't care because the fish in that scenario are A, used to a lot of boat traffic, and 2, they're not really set up on one spot, so they move around a little bit, and they're just generally hovering over a hard spot on the bottom.
Done any good?
We've caught a bunch. How about y'all?
Yeah, we just turned around right there and caught a 5-pound channel cat.
Oh, nice. Very good.
The trollers were mostly pulling hard baits of some sort, flicker shads. One guy we talked to was pulling flicker shads, actually convinced me to get a flicker shad out and throw it, and we did. I learned from other anglers just like you guys do. This guy's like, oh, they love flicker shads here. So I got one out, I tied it on, and we caught a couple of fish with it as well.
The morning, we were out fishing the trollers, and now in the afternoon, the trollers are soundly out fishing us, the guys that are pulling crankbaits. We talked to one guy who's got 3 flicker shads on, and he's caught a lot of fish in the last couple hours, whereas our bite slowed down. So I think it has to do a little bit with the different level of feeding activity. And when they're not feeding, you need to cover more of the flat. When they are feeding, you can settle in and jig them better, as we showed you. So that may have a lot to do with that. Of course, a very diverse angler would be adept at both. The guy Dan Swanson that works with me, his boat's set up accordingly. He'd come out here and jig all day or all morning, and then put the boards out and get after him trolling in the afternoon. This, I've got a real bright color on. There's one right there. It's like lime green. Be real gentle with him, real gentle, because he's just wee little crappie and he's on there. Come on up here, buddy. So that's two bites, and that's why they come off. We've caught big crappies and little crappies today. Thing with the flicker shad, just like any other crankbait, it might be a finesse crankbait, but I'm never gonna wind it 100 yards in one direction. I'm always gonna pull on it with the rod a little bit and give it a little bit of a pulse or a stall, or I'll steer it. Commonly I'll steer the bait a lot, go in that route. Just maybe a couple faster turns on the reel handle every so often to speed it up ever so slightly. But anything other than just wind it in a straight line, most typically I'm gonna pull it with the rod to control the action of the bait, because that's what gives me the feel. Is it vibrating hard, or is it just barely vibrating, or whatever the case might be. Throwing it on the nanofill will for sure give you a chance for that. Look at that, guys. How nice is that? When you got the rod hanging off one side of the boat and it gets bit, and then you set the rod down on the other side of the boat and it's trolling along 10 feet behind the boat, and you catch a beautiful baby little crappie. Isn't that the cutest little crappie you've ever seen? I love crappie. Mwah. I slid in a little bit because we got those couple of crappies in a row right there. We always keep track of depth range, you know, more than almost any other variable. And in this case today, we've been bid as shallow as like 4 feet and as deep as like 12. So it's just been, they've just roamed all over. There's one right there. They've just roamed all over this flat. And if you just cover enough of this flat real gentle, that's a crappie. And you have to be, no, it's not a crappie. I don't have to be quite as gentle with that one. There's a saw-guy, guys. And yet another saw-guy on a little flicker shad, bright colored flicker shad, bright colored gulp minnows, Adobe Creek State Wildlife Area. Guys, I've caught so many fish, I'm flustered.
Fishful Thinker is brought to you by Lowrance, Find, Navigate, Dominate. Peterson Toyota, Fort Collins, Colorado. Sportsman's Warehouse, gear up for unforgettable. A key thing is the color of the water in that lake. I've already mentioned repeatedly that it's stained, it's muddy. The lake shore itself is muddy. That means that you're gonna have a lot of sediment in the water, and sediment is what makes fish hard to locate stuff, and that's when I really want a bright color. If I have tannin in the water, which makes it look like tea, I can get away with a lot of different things, but when it's got sediment in the water, like silt or sand, then all light is muted, all colors are dampened, and it gets much harder for fish to locate your bait. So if you watch this show, you'll notice that we caught most everything on chartreuse over white, the brightest colors that I can get. I mean, that little flicker shad looks like he has a battery in him, it's so bright. And that chartreuse over white gulp minnow, very bright colored baits.
So I've got a short 10-pound fluorocarbon leader, trilene 100% fluorocarbon leader on there. And that's my whole system for throwing the flicker shad. It's a good way to catch them. Oh, I got one on my minnow though, right here instead. See, because I have a second rod stamp, and now I caught one. Oh my gosh, look at the size of that crappie. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Look at the size of that crappie, guys. Oh, but if that ain't good action, I have told you a million times, I leave a gulp minnow hanging over the side of the boat. I have a second rod stamp. I leave a gulp minnow hanging over the side of the boat all day long, 3 feet below the boat, and you'll be amazed at how many times that thing will get bit over the course of a day. That's the second time today it's been bit, and that is a beautiful, shiny, beautiful Adobe Creek State Wildlife Area crappie. I think the big surprise, and this is one of the things that a lot of you guys emailed me about, was the fish's propensity for getting directly under my boat. And it's a trick I've seen a lot of times. We've put it on TV a bunch of times, but I've never really heard of other people doing it very much. And sometimes I'm hesitant to even talk about stuff like that. But the water was just shallow enough on the stuff we were fishing that I could sink my shallow water anchors in the boat, which will go 8 feet below the boat, and hold the boat in one position. And in so doing, then the boat doesn't move at all, and you don't have an electric motor that's buzzing around and creating any current. Well, what happens immediately thereafter is you are now the only shady spot, and when you look at the footage, you can see how sunny it was. I'm now the only shady spot, right? I now have a 21.5 foot long, 8 foot wide boat creating a giant shady spot on the bottom underneath it. Well, they love that, and they pile underneath there. And so we had to demonstrate the old trick of hold still real quick in the boat, don't do anything, let the fish come to you, and then drop the bait straight underneath the boat. And when you drop that gulp minnow down underneath the boat and you put it on the bottom and just barely pick it up and just keep moving it a little bit, enough to make it look alive, all those saw guys that are now sitting directly under your boat because the boat's not moving are gonna come out and grab that bait. And very, very, very easy if you watch it, very easy watching these fish come out and grab that bait. And it's literally the lines up against the rub rail of the boat. I'm not talking about sticking your rod 8 feet out to the side. They're not gonna swim out there and get it. They want that thing literally under the boat. If you could get it underneath there, you'd get bit every single time. But I drop it right down the edge of the boat, hold it relatively still, a little bit of lift and drop on the rod, and that's it. And if you watch the hook sets, I'll pick up on it, you can see the rod tip will load. That's a product of the gulp. In other words, one of those saw guys or walleyes grabbed that thing,
Now he's holding it. When I pick up, there's a little bit of bow in the tip of the rod, just a little bit. I can feel the weight right to a hook set. You are not gonna feel these fish bite. They're not charging out of there and pouncing on your lure. They're gonna sip it right underneath the boat. And so you drop it and you're barely moving it and you go to pick up on it and now it's heavier. Well, it's because he's got it. He's not going anywhere. He's sitting under your boat. So he's just gonna hold on to it and then whack. If you had something like a hard bait, say a spoon or something like that, you're not gonna hold it at all. You're gonna be Johnny on the spot with a hook set. But with that gulp, I can wait. I can pick up, yep, that's for sure a fish. I'm not snagged, it's no problem. Whack, and go ahead and set him with the hook or set him with the rod. And that makes a big difference. And it's typically associated with a summertime pattern. It needs to be calm. If you're gonna take that boat and use it as your cover, which is effectively what we're doing, we created our own dock in the middle of the lake. It needs to be calm out because it can't be any wave action or anything like that. The fish really want it to be calm and sunny, and if it is calm and sunny, they will pile under your boat.
Got him. Oh, right under the boat. I'm telling you, dude, that's gonna end up being the deal. They're gonna be right under the boat. I bet you if I put the power poles down right here and we just sit here, they'll load up right under the boat. Come on. But unlike some of the state wildlife areas, there's a relatively significant, got him, there we go. I told you, right under the boat, guys. There you go. Come off of there. Easy, buddy, easy. That's a sharp fish. You don't want to get caught by him. So there's what everybody around us is catching by the jillions of right here. And by the time this show actually airs, these fish will all be this long. Here, got him. There we go. That's why you do that, guys. There's another one right under the boat. Come on in here, buddy. Come on in here. That's a mean and dirty trick. That is a mean and dirty trick. And your perfect hook set right in the snoot because he's directly underneath the boat. And there you go. The key with it is, though, is subtle. You know, less is more. You don't want to get crazy with them. Got him. There we go. Just like that. And he's gonna look a lot like the last one. Oh, come on up in here, buddy. Oh, and there you go, guys. There's your perfect fish right there.
Fishful Thinker is brought to you by Berkeley, your fish, our science. Abu Garcia, Fish to Win. Sportsman's Warehouse, gear up for unforgettable. That gulp minnow, you guys, fans of Fishful Thinker know we throw that a lot. And I'm up to 76 species on that bait right now. As of this airing right here, I'm fixing to go try to collect a couple more of them in Alaska here in a couple weeks. But that bait will catch everybody, which is another reason I throw it so much, because when I got to Adobe Creek, I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest with you. I hadn't been to that lake. I knew that there wasn't a lot of structure in it just from looking at basic maps, but didn't really have any idea. So if you throw a gulp minnow, you're always in the hunt because it smells right, it tastes right, it looks right. If a fish gets close enough to it, he's gonna bite it. And if he bites it, he's gonna hold it and give me a chance to detect it and set the hook. And those are very important keys to that bait. The 3-inch size is the most standard. We throw that a ton, almost always on an 1/8-ounce jig head, same with this show. Almost always on 6-pound, trying 100% fluorocarbon. And why fluorocarbon instead of braid? I can tell you why. I throw it on braid sometimes, but typically I do that around vegetation or running water. Vegetation, so I can snap the bait out of the vegetation and rip the grass off it, or in running water because of the resistance in the water. The monofilament or fluorocarbon is so much thicker that the sweeping current will create drag, whereas braid, it doesn't do that so much. And also I get instantaneous hook sets in the current, I can stay tight. In the situation of fishing the gulp minnow in some place like Adobe Creek, there's not enough vegetation to worry about. For one. For two, the fish are going to be close to me. I'm not making long, giant throws. In fact, a lot of them I'm right directly underneath the boat. And the fluoro is more forgiving in that regard as well. It's also in some ways just a little bit easier to fish with. I don't have to worry about leaders or anything like that. and so it can be a little easier to fish with. So on that particular day, it was a 3-inch minnow, the 1/8-ounce jig head, 6-pound, 100% fluorocarbon, my standard gold minnow rod, which is 610, medium light, extra fast, and a little MGX Revo MGX reel. It's such a standard combo for me.
So I'm doing a typical pattern I'll do when we deal with walleyes or sawguys, either one, in summertime, and that is a lot of jigging, a lot of gulp. It just seems like this time of year, if you can really get a lot of fish to bite the gulp minnow. And so I've got a 3-inch gulp minnow, I've got it on an 1/8-ounce jig head, my standard gulp minnow setup, and the whole point is to get it on the bottom and make it look more or less alive. So I'm hopping it around to help them locate it. Not necessarily fishing it real fast per se, but I'm not all dead sticking it either. I just want to keep it moving enough to help the fish find it. I've got it real bright. I've got it in chartreuse and white because we've got some stain to the water right here. Fish, got him. There we go. All right, well that didn't take us very long, guys. It took me a minute to get tight on that one. And that's what we're told there's lots of in here. We're gonna swing him up in the boat. That's what we were told by the hatchery tech out in eastern Colorado that there was lots of, and he thumped that gulp minnow, guys, right there.
So in closing, Adobe Creek Reservoir. Simple lake in some ways, which also makes it difficult in other ways. Because there's not a lot of structure or cover to break down, you're forced to fishing more open water scenarios. In the morning, I was doing better casting. In the afternoon, the trollers were doing better. And I'm totally fine with that. At the end of the day, I'm the guy that preaches that you fish how you like to fish. And that's what I did there, and it isn't always about catching the most fish. The other thing to keep in mind is check water levels, guys. I'm not gonna be responsible if you drive down there and there's no water left in that lake. So before you get in your truck to go to there, call and check, because that lake fluctuates a lot, and it does it commonly. And there's a low water ramp, but the water will get off the ramp even in no time flat in the summertime. So keep that in mind as well. You can check with Colorado Parks and Wildlife on that. Again, it's Blue Lake State Wildlife Area. If you want to join the conversation on social media, we'd appreciate that. That's at Fishful Thinker on Facebook and Instagram. And especially, we would love it if you would check out our YouTube channel. That's at Fishful Thinker on YouTube channel as well. And we put more than 300 videos up there a couple a week. And so check those out and subscribe while you're there. Otherwise, we hope you'll tune in, and we'll see you next week.
Got him. There we go. That's why you do that, guys. There's another one right under the boat. And you perfect hook set right in the snoot because he's directly underneath the boat. And there you go. What was that? Oh, come on now. They are messing with me. Got him. Oh, I hung that one, bud. You walleye. Got him. Oh. This way. There, I got him. Oh, they want that thing to go fast, dude. Did you see that? Got him. Oh, God. All right, you can cut for a sec. I am going to get a blade out.